This is part number 9 of Marcus Garvey. Part number 9. So, one of the links you want to look up is a couple links. One is called Killer Clowns by Young Elder. So if you go to Young Elder, Y-U-N-G, Elder, look up the video called Killer Clowns. Killer Clowns. The other one you want to look up is it's by Professor Emerita Joanne Burke. And the title of the video on YouTube is What did Marcus Garvey do at Brybeck? Professor Emerita Joanna Burke asked, what did Marcus Garvey do at Brybeck College, where he went to college? So those are 2 videos you need to look up as well. So we continue on Garvey. If I didn't read this one to you before, I will again. But this is from the Tampa Tribune, right? January 30, 1930. Tampa Tribune. Cuba bars Garvey. Havana, January 29th. Associated Press. President Machado today signed a decree barring from Cuba Marcus Garvey of Kingston, Jamaica, because of alleged seditious propaganda. The Negro-backed Africa leader has visited this country many times. He has headquarters at Kingston. So that was 1930. This would have been after he got out of prison. So you can't come to Cuba. So obviously there was still something going on, because this is well after he had gotten out of prison. Let's continue on with Garvey. Garvey self-convicted. And this goes into the Black Star Line and Garvey conviction and sentence. It talks about his conviction and his sentence. It says the role that Garvey played so well as to react to his own undoing was that of a magnetic and glorified salesman of an idea. The idea was racially solidarity based on the background of color, or more strictly, the absence of color. You see that shit? It says right here, the absence of color. The background of color, or more strictly, the absence of color. We went over black and Negro and colored. I'll enlarge it for you, since you might think I'm making it up right here. The idea was racial solidarity based on the background of color, or more strictly, the absence of color. For Garvey painted everything black. Did you see that? Who does that today? This says a lot right here in value. The absence of color, for Garvey painted everything black. Who's painting everything black today? It's the same tactics. And for what reasons are they doing it? To denationalize you. You don't have no rights. His success in selling his idea of an all-black steamship was so great that the money came in at a constant stream. It says, but he lacked the executive ability to use it in the proper way. Nope, it was all a plan from the jump, people. And this, you're going to see, is part of something much bigger. With the removal of Mr. Garvey from the head of the organization, which he has built up, the question arises as to his probable future. The organization is based on the soul of black solidarity, and it lacks practical purpose or reliable management. So it goes on to give more information on Garvey. Which, by now, everything that we've read so far shouldn't kind of be surprised, but maybe you are surprised because we weren't hearing this. And I may have covered this one as well, but this is again from the Dallas Express. Just mention this one to you and I'll keep moving. Saturday, August 26, 1922. And that is the title at the top, Public Turning on Black Moses. Garvey and high officials split policy, salaries listed. So it's talking about monies and some more shenanigans. And it talked about to give specific times and locations of meetings to where they were talking about Garvey here. And it also talks about this article again talks about the king of Africa that came over, and the native chiefs sent him over here to investigate the murder of his daughter. So this covers that too, Laura Kofi. And I read how they presented the revisionist history to you about Laura Kofi as if she was a Garveyite. This is one I wanted to read to you, which is important. So this is from California Eagle, September 16th, 1922. California Eagle. So this is referring to some threats. Now, let's get into this one. And it talks about times were lively around magazine offices at 7th Avenue Tuesday when A. Philip Randolph, okay, let me enlarge this. So I gotta go over this one with y'all. A. Philip Randolph, co-editor of The Messenger and leader in the fight against Marcus Garvey, received a package containing a human hand and a typewritten letter signed KKK saying he had better be a fully paid up member. Did you hear that? A. Philip Randolph. A. Philip Randolph. Remember this, he had another organization. It's called the NAACP. Hope y'all caught that. A. Philip Randolph, co-editor of The Messenger and leader in the fight against Garvey, received a package containing a human hand and a typewritten letter signed KKK saying he had better be a fully paid up member in the Universal Negro Improvement Association within a week. I told you earlier that the people that were losing money were millionaires or thousandaires. And they were prominent people that had initially invested in Garvey. A. Philip Randolph. You never see anywhere that he was a member of the UNIA or an investor. But I bet you he was, because he was the one that initially took Garvey around and showed him around in Harlem. Showed him where he could get his newspapers and how he could get them distributed. The same locations where Drew Ali in the Canaanite Temple the Moorish and Divine National Movement had their papers distributed. That was the only connection, is the newspapers. And a few members switching back and forth between organizations. I can show you that later as well. But right here it says he better be a fully paid up member in the Universal Negro Improvement Association within a week. The letter further stated that if you do not, right here, if you do not, the hand was that of a mulatto Negro cut off across the wrist. It evidently had been washed clean before wrapped, and there was no blood on it, yet it was not dried up. It was embedded in a whitish powder that kept down the odor. Somebody knew what they was doing. The writer and associate in the office of the Messenger was returning from lunch and stepped into it. Just goes into that what he said. Talked about how he noticed what it was and all that in the package. And let's go on. It says how he opened up the package and it was a hand and all that stuff. So it says, presently I hear Mr. Owens say, Randolph, here is something from a friend from New Orleans. See what it is? And this is what it was. This was the hand wrapped up. So it continues to go on between him and A. Philip Randolph. How A. Philip Randolph was sent a chopped off hand in the mail, telling him he better pay up or be paid up. Okay? So this is also a detailed article here that talks about the incident. So also mentions that they don't think it came from the KKK. They think that it came from Garveyites. And this letter from the Klan was sent as an answer to Mr. Randolph's reply to Marcus Garvey, we believe. Okay? That appeared in the August Messenger why they didn't take Mr. Owens to task, because they haven't yet read his "Should Marcus Garvey be deported?" Right? So they was already talking about getting him up out of here, and you see what the Garveyites were doing. And that wasn't the only murder that we read about so far. So here's another one. This is Garvey in London. Okay, this is when Garvey was went to London after he was deported. And this is from, let's read this one, okay? New York, New York, January 16th, 1928. 1928. Remember, Garvey went to jail in 25. Marcus Garvey gets chilly hearing in London Hall when he opens his campaign for African sovereignty. Chilly hearing, okay? Newspapermen, curiosity seekers, about 25 followers, 200 off, hear him speak in Albert Hall, which seats about 10,000. So at one time he was filling it up with thousands, and now he's about 200 deep. 25 of them are followers. It goes on. I want to read this one to you as well. So Garvey's sentence was commuted after he had served 2 years, 9 months and 8 days, and he was immediately deported to Jamaica, British West Indies. See, he went back to Jamaica. His release from prison coming on Saturday, November 26, 1927, with his deportation taking place from New Orleans a day or two later. It was reported that Garvey supporters in New Orleans gave him $10,000 for expenses in Jamaica. So he got 10 grand to go back to Jamaica. See what that is today. Do the math. And later reports were to the effect that the UNI leader has cashed 40,000 pounds, which is 192,000, and was living like a lord. Right here, people, living like a lord in the Caribbean island. Rumors, and I can only say there's rumors of people passed down at the time from family members that was associated that said he was ran out of Jamaica and out of the Caribbean is why he left. His life was in danger. I just wonder what the conversation between him and Drew Ali was about in prison. Wonder what that was about. Because I'm pretty sure it was more or less, I told you so, brother. I told you. You should have stuck with what we was doing. I told you. Now Garvey has gone to England to spread his propaganda. You hear that? Now Garvey has gone to England to spread his propaganda, and London papers have given much space to his activities. Everybody want to know, how was everything about him getting around everywhere so fast, so quickly? The Daily Sketch, May 23rd, in an article headed Emperor Comes to Town, with a subhead telling of his impudent plan to be the leader of the Negro race. Tells of Garvey's preparation for the opening of his campaign in England. Yeah. European headquarters. At the moment he is preparing for the opening of his campaign in England, he has already booked the Royal Albert Hall for a meeting, June 6th. And it continues to go on about that. Here it says, in a one-room office, this is his office, in a one-room office made out of the sitting room of an apartment house in West Kensington yesterday, the Daily Sketch found 4 white women and a Negro lad sending out many thousands of circulars calling attention to this meeting. 4 white women and 1 brother working in Garvey's office. Small office, real small. You see how much money he had when he came to Jamaica. Mr. Garvey has gone to Liverpool for a few days, the Daily Sketch was told, and I'm afraid we cannot tell you anything. Mr. Garvey has gone to Liverpool for a few days, the Daily Sketch was told, and I'm afraid we cannot tell you anything in his absence other than the meeting is to take place in the Albert Hall. So we can't tell you where he went, who he's meeting with. Remember that Yarmouth Lodge that's in London, the Masonic Lodge? Keep that in mind. Mr. Garvey came from Jamaica recently with his wife and secretary, but until he returns from Liverpool, I'm afraid we cannot tell you anything of what he hopes to do here. Makes big boasts. In the circulators, which is the newspapers, pamphlets, Garvey claims to represent an organization of 11 million members in Africa. 11 million. In Africa, in the United States, Asia, South, and Central America, and the West Indies and Europe. He promises to deliver the greatest speeches ever heard in the world's histories. He has a larger following in the world today. We just saw that wasn't true. Right? We saw that wasn't true. Says he has a good conceit of himself. Never in history of the world or in the States has any man spoken like Garvey. World's greatest orator. Okay. So it's comparing him to some of the world's greatest orators. Here it is. There it is. Y'all ready for more on Garvey? We keep it rolling, man. Here is you always wonder what Garvey's attire represented. You have the Freemason on your right, and you have Garvey with the same headdress on your left. Yep. There it is, folks. Let's keep going. Well, that don't mean nothing bad, right? Okay, here is Lady Henrietta Vinton Davis. There she is. I mean, nothing bad, right? Nah, not at all. Just pictures and images and things they were societal. All right, here is a place that he commonly spoke at in New York, which was, this is from the Monitor, Omaha, Nebraska, March 27, 1925. The Troubadours gave their play entitled Return to Africa under Marcus Garvey in Masonic Hall last Friday night, which is said to have a splendid audience, and the play was incredible. Masonic Hall. Okay, we went over that one. That's Sir Sidney. This is Garvey on the scene in 1917. We just kind of stated that. But this is from the Pittsburgh Courier, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, August 13, 1927. He didn't come on the scene until 1917. This is what this article covers. Okay. And in 1919, he was saying he represented the 400 million Negroes of the world. And the 400 million Negroes will not stand for you telling them how they must conduct their business. But it's just showing you he was on the scene in 1917. That's that article. All right. That's one against another gentleman. We'll skip over that one. This article is how he lost the UNIA, and he lost followers in Chicago and New York to another organization. I can only imagine what that organization was. This is March 1925, 1926. The other organization that was before Garvey and had once again begun to outpace Garvey after all the allegations was the Moorish Science Temple of America. In the FBI's vault, which you can get under the FOIA request, it says that the Moorish Science Temple had over 200,000 members, 17 cities. By 1928, this is 26. But this article is talking about how Garvey was losing followers in Chicago and New York in large numbers. We talked about Garvey being banned from Cuba, right? Seditious acts. So now we're going to get into this one for the Moors. Noble Drew Ali returns after long visit south, the Chicago Defender, National Edition, 1921. And this is a court thing. Toro's moniker talks about Garvey's debate and his own attorney. And it continues to talk about, mentions some money here. It also mentions some other names that you can look up and find. It's a lot of information on Garvey, man, that was made public that we don't know. This has been up for years, man. It said Haley had testified that of the $165,000 purchase price of the Yarmouth for the assistant district attorney, said Garvey had paid 8 times its value. The North American steamship line received only $135,000. Okay, so there's some moving of some money going around there. And it talks about how Garvey deceived the defendant. That's a court testimony. It talks about junkets here. It talks about more money in this article as well. And that is, once again, that is from the Appeal, which is the St. Paul, Minnesota, Saturday, January 9th, 1923. It's from the Appeal. Black Star Line of Myth. So here is from the Dispatch. Again, Oklahoma City, baby. Oklahoma City was putting it down in the 1920s. May 11, 1922, the Dispatch. And it's titled Black Star Line of Myth. Pay attention to that date. New York City, a severe rebuke was given to Marcus Garvey, the leading spirit Back to Africa movement, when it was brought out that $600,000 in investment and invested in the Black Star Line by thousands of small investors among colored people was practically wiped out. Garvey was descended in 3 actions, the most important being the case brought against him by Edward Orr. We talked about that one before, right? Goes on and talks about James D. Brooks. Brought some charges against him. Brooks and Orr were repeated by represented by Robert Waring, and that's an attorney. Garvey not a citizen. So here we go. This is what I want to read to you. Garvey admitted that he was not a citizen, having, very important here, people, having resided here less than 5 years. That would put him in the country in 1917. This is 1922. That will put Garvey in the country in 1917. Out of his own mouth. 1917. Okay? So, to you all that know math, Canaanite Temple, Moorish, National and Divine Movement, on the scene in 1911. Established in 1913. It's 13 before 1917. I think 13 is before 1917. 1913 comes before 1917. How was Garvey the forerunner to Drew Ali? Garvey in the country in 1917. 1922, he's known all over the world. Who do you think helped him get that status to be known all over the world? Who do you think helped him? How was his newspapers everywhere across the country in just a few years? How was that possible? Let's continue. Less than 5 years, but was going to make application, so he was going to apply for citizenship. It says, in that short space of time, see that, y'all? I just told you. In that short space of time, through his exploits of various money-making undertakings, he had persuaded millions of people of his own race to invest their life savings. Life savings. I told you 15,000 prominent people lost their wealth, land in the States under Garvey. 15,000 that had nationalities. Under this man. What would we have today? That's just the 15,000 we know about. Probably some others that were very embarrassed. When on the stand, Garvey said the Black Star Line represented an investment of $600,000. We talked about that, $145,000. Here it is right here. The mythical ship Phyllis Wheatley, named after the Negro poetess, was never seen. That's in this article right here. The mythical Phyllis Wheatley, named after the Negro poet, was never seen. Advertisements were carried of the passage to Liberia on this steamship. Garvey denied knowing anything pertaining to the advertisements to Phyllis Wheatley. Probably didn't know anything about that, or which an investment has been conducted by the federal government. You see that? All right. It goes on. Brooks under indictment. It talks about Brooks being under indictment. So that is another one as we continue on with Marcus Garvey. By the way, Marcus Garvey never set foot in Africa, by the way. I think we all know that Garvey never made it to Africa, never set foot in Africa. But he went to London twice. And at this time in history, it was pretty easy to get to Africa. It was a lot easier than it is now. There was steamships going back and forth quite frequently from the Caribbean. So it wasn't hard to get there. And you didn't need all the paperwork you needed now. So there's all the excuses people give about that. Nope, there was a lot of people that went back and forth to Africa. Quite a few, even some of his own members. And some of them just put on hats and used other IDs, and they had no problems getting in or out. As we continue on with Garvey. November 19th, 1927. Okay. It says Noble Drew Ali, prophet founder, head of the Moorish National Divine Movement, has returned to the city after an extended visit in the South. Prophet Ali monitored from Chicago to Atlanta. Yeah, it says looks like monitored or motion, whatever it is. I can't make out that word. From Chicago to Atlanta, Georgia, where he spent a few hours visiting Marcus Garvey in the federal prison. Marcus Garvey was very much pleased with the splendid, uplifted work being done by the Moorish Divine Movement. The organization has launched a drive for more members learning the great work that is being done, and asked to write Prophet Drew Ali. Yep. So once again, the organization has launched a drive. So this is what I'm wondering here. Which organization has launched a drive for more members? Persons desirous for learning of the great work that is being done, and asked to write Prophet Ali. It doesn't say which organization. Because Garvey's organization was faulty. The Moors were around before him, they were around during him, and they were now around after him. So I'm still curious how people are saying that Marcus Garvey was the forerunner to Noble Drew Ali. I'm going to read from this. Circle 7. Holy Quran. Divinely prepared by the Noble Drew Ali. Prepared. Okay? Now, chapter 48 reads, in regards to Garvey, this is would be chapter 48, and is going to be number 3. In those modern days, there came a forerunner of Jesus who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name is Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of earth to prepare to meet the coming prophet, who was to bring the true and divine creed of Islam, and his name is Noble Drew Ali, and the everlasting gospel to the sons of men, to every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree, and return to their own, and be one with Father God Allah. Okay, now, first of all, it says this. Well, let me mention this. Nowhere have I ever seen in any of Marcus Garvey's writings where he talks about Drew Ali. That's number one. I don't hear very many Garveyites even talking about Drew Ali. I hear Moors talking about Garvey, but I don't hear Garveyites talking about Drew Ali or Pan-Africanists. That's number one. Number two, it says Let me repeat that again, because it's speaking in the second person. It says, what's to bring in the divine creed of ISLAM, which I never hear Marcus Garvey say anything about Islam. Or the science of ISLAM. Nothing. Never hear Garvey say anything about that. And his name is Noble Drew Ali, who prepared and sent to this earth. So why does it say my name is Noble Drew Ali? It says his name is Noble Drew Ali. And then it goes on to say, in the same, number 3, that every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree. That's nationality. Marcus Garvey wasn't teaching nationality. And return to their own, that's nationality, and be one with the Father. Now it also goes on to say, in the same chapter, in verse 3, in number 10, it says, come you all Asiatics of America. Asiatics, doesn't say Negroes. Asiatics. Because America was also known as Asia, Aussia at one time. Come all ye Asiatics and hear the truth about your nationality and birthrights, because you're not Negroes. Let me say that again. In number 10, number 3 talks about Garvey, who never talked about nationality as Moorish Americans, or nationality in period, just alone. Marcus Garvey was Negro, black, and colored all day, 24/7. Once again, in chapter 48, verse 3, every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree. It's your heritage, your nationality, and return to their own. And then in number 10, in the same chapter, it says, come all ye Asiatics of America and hear the truth about your nationality and birthright, because you're not Negroes. That's chapter 48 in here. So my question would be to you all, who put that in here? Who put that about Garvey in there? Because it's speaking in second person. And right after it mentions Garvey, it mentions nationality. Didn't Garvey steal 15,000 birthrights? But Drew Ali is telling you that you have a birthright here and nationality. And we're Asiatics, and we're Moors, and we're from the Americas, and from other places as well. And Garvey is saying you're Negroes, blacks, and colors, and you got to return to Africa. Once again, the Moorish and National Divine Movement, Canaanite Temple, founded on the scene in 1911, founded in 1913. 1913. Marcus Garvey not on the scene until 1917, by his own words. How in the hell is Garvey the forerunner to Noble Drew Ali? Now, I also have some images of some Garveyites that begin to wear fezzes. So it is a possibility that through the newspaper distribution that Garvey had, Drew Ali was in the same area. One of his organizations was in Jersey at the time. Although in the mid-20s, Drew Ali was moving in the South. But there were still organizations on the East Coast. And the newspaper distribution was probably the connection between all three. All three, I'm saying the NAACP, the Garveyites, and the MSTA. It probably had something to do with the distribution of newspapers, because Garvey knew how to get that done. Let's continue on Garvey. Part 10 on Garvey. So we've all seen this picture. You can pull up this picture online as well. So there's a lot of people that have put up this image on paper, on the net, other places, and they're saying that that's Noble Drew Ali next to Marcus Garvey. That is not Timothy Drew. It's not Thomas Drew. Doesn't look anything like Timothy Drew or Thomas Drew. That is not Noble Drew Ali at all. I think he was identified as another gentleman, a prominent businessman. I know he had some type of extended title, but that's not Noble Drew Ali. So we can put that to an end, please. It's not Noble Drew Ali. The gentleman here, it's not him. I want to mention this as well, since this is up. This is Prince Hall, the pioneer of Negro Masonry, Proofs of Legitimacy of Prince Hall Masonry by John Edwards Bruce, also known as Bruce Grit. I encourage you to look up John Edwards Bruce. He was the man that introduced Marcus Garvey into the Masonic order and to where Marcus Garvey was a prominent member, I believe, of the Yarmouth Lodge in London, England. We can also get into what's called the African lodges. They're not out of Africa. The African lodges are out of the Caribbean. They're not out of Africa. So we look up John Edwards Bruce Grit. Get some more information on him as well, some of the work he did. He was the editor of 7 newspapers, and he wrote a lot of articles for newspapers in the 1900s. And most importantly, he wrote a prominent article on a fictitious account of slave narratives. So he was just making up stories about slavery. I have that article buried in my computer and I gotta find it. But this is John Edwards Bruce. So if you find one fictional account of slavery, you know what that says. And this gentleman wrote, I don't know how many books on during the time about the Negro experience in America. John Edwards Bruce Grit. Also wanted to read this to you. James Wormley was the FBI agent's name. James Wormley Jones was born 1884 in Fort Monroe, Virginia. He received schooling through Cambridge, Massachusetts, Norfolk University in Richmond. He didn't finish. Jones served as captain with the 92nd Infantry Division of the Army, and was an officer with the Washington, D.C. Police Department. The Bureau of Investigation hired him to undergo the UNIA to get close to Garvey, reporting what he learned directly to the head of the General Intelligence Division, J. Edgar Hoover. Okay, so James Wormley didn't really come into the picture until later on during the UNIA. I wanted to point it out to you as well about James Wormley. People mention his name a lot. Garvey also had promised trade of produce with several South American nations. I think Cuba was one of them. And that was one of the reasons he didn't fulfill the agreement he made with Cuba as far as with trade. So that leaves a little bit of room for question. Maybe there was something to do with trade with the ships first. But initially he was eventually barred from Cuba. So there's just so much to cover on Garvey. I have so many articles, man, on Garvey. This is a picture of Garvey here. Next to Marcus Garvey is standing right here. And that is Garvey at the funeral of John Edwards Bruce. And it's Miss John Edwards Bruce, Marcus Garvey, Arthur Schomburg, who's next to Garvey, and other mourners at the grave of John Edwards Bruce. And you see the Masons in their Masonic garb. So that's a little bit on Garvey. So I want to share some things with you about the nation of Liberia. It was created in 1822 as a resettlement nation by the Society of the Colonization of Free People of Color of America. And it's just talking about the nation of Liberia going back before the Garveyite movement. This kind of covers a little of that information. But I also want to go into, where is it at? Here it is right here. And these are some excerpts that I came across online. So you can question the credibility if you want, but these are excerpts. In 1985, there was a talk of restarting the Freemasonry in Liberia, and a special Prince Hall meeting was held in 1987 in New Orleans for the purpose of installing a new Grand Master. A Grand Convention was held the next year in the Liberian capital of Monrovia, and gradually Freemasonry was reestablished. The once majestic Grand Lodge building had been ravaged by squatters over the years. Since then, Liberia has been torn by repeated coups of civil war, and Freemasonry in the country has continued to be persecuted. A former President, Charles Taylor, one of a series of revolutionaries who held control of the country until he was outed in 1990, was tried in 2009 for war crimes. During his trial, he made light of allowing troops to post human heads and skulls on enemy checkpoints, and saying it was no worse than displaying of skulls in Western fraternal organizations. So it just kind of goes on to talk about, the article talks about the former Grand Lodge of Liberia. That's the former Grand Lodge Temple in Liberia, Monrovia. And the article was A Tragic History of Freemasonry in Liberia. So I'll admit a little bit. I'll leave some of that out, but that's basically the tragic history of Freemasonry in Liberia. And I had to cut and paste some of the information, but I wanted to present some of those things to you as well when it came to Garvey. And also want to show you this, since I pulled it up, when people talk about the history of the Klan. It is called the White Book, the Koran, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, CUNO, Character, Honor, Duty, the Imperial Palace Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, Atlanta, Georgia. And this is the Koran, a ritual of the women of the Klan. Now I'm showing you this because this also comes from, people talk about the similar with the Quran, but this word also comes from what's called chronos or chronology, right? And it's basically a lot of principles that anybody can apply to certain things in life, but it's basically how the order runs. And people think that this is something that these people came up with on their own, but no, they didn't. They've taken information and corrupted it, and they're just using it for their benefit. They have to use the power of the original people against the original people. They can't come up with something on their own. It won't work. So that's just information on Garvey. And once again, I know some of the information is it's a lot. It's a lot to digest, but I wanted to make sure I gave you enough and gave you a lot. So there's not going to be any questions as to what the Garvey movement was responsible for and involved in. You saw the article where it says there to the national steal the birthrights of 15,000 prominent Americans. And now we have this ongoing struggle between the Black and Negro organizations, the autonomous organizations. It's just they want to continue to make it look like you're a foreigner. Therefore, you don't have an estate in the Americas. Therefore, it can be forfeited, and you don't have to receive any just treatment by law, because you're adapting these titles of Negro, Black, and Colored that are chattel terms and don't mean anything on the scale of history or even real law. This is another one. I'm just going to hit you with this. It says, when following the course of the constellations, those immovably and perpetually fastened upon America are reached. It will appear that while all that is sublime in the historical past centers upon Egypt, all that is sublime in the prehistoric past centers upon America, Atlantis, and has the curtain which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and America is lifted. It will be seen that the people of the eagle on the Nile, being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent, are twain are one, and that prehistoric America was the original eagle land, prior to the mighty dispensation in the days of Peleg, when the earth was divided, and the Great Plain itself was nearly rent asunder, not globe. Great Plain was nearly rent asunder. Firstborn among continents, America has been falsely denominated as the New World. It's the old world. Hers was the first dry land that lifted out of the waters. Hers was the first shore washed by the ocean that enveloped all the earth besides. And while Europe was represented only by islands rising here and there above the sea, America, Atlantis, already stretched in an unbroken line of land from Nova Scotia to the far west. So, America's people, America's the old world. You want to run to Africa, maybe some of you are from Africa, you need to probably go back if you are. But remember, if you're not from there, and you're really from here, you're abandoning your vast estate. So this is an introduction into Marcus Garvey and the Great Reset of 1900s through 1933. There's no way that Marcus Garvey is a forerunner to Noble Drew Ali. In fact, the Moorish Science Temple of America, since the Canaanite Temple in 1913, was always teaching that you had a nationality. Although some of the teachings appear to be teaching you're from Spain or you're from Africa or Morocco Those places weren't even founded in 1956, let alone 1913. Make sure you comprehend the oral statements and prophecies of Drew Ali and get books on etymology to see exactly what he was talking about. And when you do, it's going to blow your mind. But the Moorish Science Temple was the only organization in public that was teaching you had a nationality, you weren't Negro, black, and colored. Then all of a sudden, as there's a great reset going on in the 1900s to steal land and resources in the state, Garvey pops up. Garvey pops up out of nowhere, and within 2 years, he has millions of listeners and followers. I have the article that says he got the ship from an associate that was an agent of the Bureau of Investigation before James Worley came in. So they were assisting Garvey. Why? Because it benefited foreigners. Because he was denationalizing and stealing birthrights from people under the auspices of Negro, black, and colored. The Jamaicans stood against him. They rebelled against Garvey first. His movement failed in Jamaica initially. That's why he came to the Americas. So you had the Moorish Science Temple, Canaanite Temple at the time, teaching nationality. Then it went to be the Holy Temple of Science. Then it went to be the Moorish Science Temple. And then, of course, Garvey pops up on the scene somewhere in there and is teaching just the opposite. And then out of the Moorish Science Temple comes the Temple of Islam, which is Elijah Muhammad. They start teaching that you're from Africa. You came on a slave ship. Change your name. X out the European name. You're black, Negro, and colored. Then from the Temple of Islam comes the Nation of Islam, and they continue to teach them the same thing. Why the Moorish Science Temple is always taught that you have a nationality. You're not black, Negro, and colored. That the Americas from Argentina to Alaska and places in South America is all yours, including Brazil. Not just yours, but it belongs to other people that look like you that are just there. It's not saying mine, mine, mine. It is saying ours, ours, ours. So who held the line through that whole time? And why are we still listening to Pan-Africanists today? Why are we still listening to that? When you can see what it's from and what it's done and what it's doing. Pan-Africanist movement. Pay attention to the article I read about Haile Selassie saying that Garvey was from London. There's some things in his family, his father and his mother, that are very interesting. Haile Selassie told you Garvey was from London. He went to London to go to school real quick. 2 years. Prominent college in London. When he was deported, he went back to Jamaica, and he left Jamaica and went where? Back to London. Never set foot in Africa. And I don't want to hear that BS that he couldn't have went because he could have went. Never set foot in Africa. If that's not mockery, I don't know what is. That's mockery. So to the Pan-Africanists, man, it's going to be a rude awakening. If you guys decided to listen to this video, it's going to be a rude awakening for you. I know you're mad, but it ain't my fault, man. I mean, I'm just looking some things up. Once again, peace and blessings to all you guys. Love and light. Safe travels. No matter who you are, what you believe, man, just hope you're safe out there. And let's continue to dig and let's continue to learn. Some things we're going to have to clear up, and it's going to be painful. So once again, contact information is solid, SOLID, mind, MIND, productions @gmail.com. I'm not here to debate anybody. You can't debate these articles. There's too many of them. I got about 40, 50 more I didn't even put up. This is a response to people as well, so I'm not here to debate. Responding to people saying Garvey was the forerunner. Even Drew Ali said it. I don't know if he said that, man. Looks like somebody didn't change his words or something. And we know that happened with C. Kirkland Bay as well. C. Kirkland Bay changed a lot of Drew Ali's writings. He changed Drew Ali's birth certificate from Moor to Negro. Yes, he did. From Moor to Negro. Put Negro on his death certificate. Negro. and it said Moor, and the county caught it because they knew it was wrong. If you don't think how important that is. Yeah. Well, like I say, love and light, safe travels. Don't be afraid to reach out if you want to build. If you heard something you like, definitely reach out. Something you question, that's cool. But debating, not here for none of that. Beyond that, peace and blessings. Safe travels. Marcus Garvey, part 11. I want to play some audio from a video clip from you. This video clip is from a brother that goes by the Real Kush Day on Instagram, and that is the Real Kush, Cush, Kush Day, Dey, on Instagram. Now, I want to point out that he's mentioning Europeans, but we have to be careful in labeling all white people from Europe, because they're not all from Europe. And I handle the melanin topic in the video, What is More, that we have to be careful, because some of them that you are classifying as white are not. Melanin often shows itself in features first, and complexion is the last. So dealing with melanin as well, we have to be careful on that. There's been a lot of our people that have passed for what you would classify as white people over the years, and they're not. And it's the same thing today. And once again, the brown hair and the brown eyes is the stamp of the Moor ancestry. But it's still going to come down the bloodline today, because there's just been so many things done, genetic experiments and tampering. So all white people do not come from Europe. You really have to get to know the person in the background and their bloodline and family to find out even if they're really that, a Slav or a Slavic, or pale, meaning complexion. Pale, the original word pale, doesn't have to do anything with complexion. It just means weak or feeble. But he makes some good points in the video about the term black and nationality, and he makes some very good points. But we have to be careful when we're talking about who's from Europe, and all white people are from Europe, because there was experiments done in the 1800s, the late 1800s. You can look up the orphan trains, and you can look up incubator babies. You can also look up Cabbage Patch children. And there was a lot of things that were being done in the late 1800s, whether you want to say genetic manipulation or whatever. So we just need to be careful of that. Till you get to know a person or their bloodline and their all that, their heritage and their genealogy, sometimes you may not know, because melanated people ruled Europe for years and years and years and years and years. Long time we dominated Europe. So, and a lot of people you think that are Africans are not Africans, they're from Europe. So the melanated man is really from all over the earth plane. The earth plane is his home. Just a lot of things were run, empires, everything was run out of the Americas. That's what they're not telling you. But let me play the clip for you, but just keep that in mind. Also on melanin, when you're talking about the 0 to 9 complexions of a Homo sentient sapien being, Homo sapien sentient being, the 0 to 9 complexions of copper, burnt brass, what you would classify as dark, as black people, that's a color. Okay, it's a description. It's not a nationality. It's not a nationality. But going back to way back, the original Homo sapien sentient being at a certain time may have been green or blue. And that's a conversation for another video. But the movie Avatar is really dropping a lot of heavy science on you. So I'm going to play the clip. And
on your name and your land and your resources and everything else, the kingdom of the kings of heaven will be given to you. You might be talking like spirituality, love, and light and all that, but as soon as you say that you're a person of color, black man or black woman, or you call a hybrid European white, you just neutralized everything positive that you said out your mouth. As soon as that left your mouth, Everything you was talking about died. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. Law governs all events, and it's always happening. You can't turn it off. You can just be in law, or you can be an outlaw. 24/7, 365. It's always on. Alright? So once you say all this great stuff about economics, melanated, as soon as black left your mouth, it's dehumanizing. It's genocide. Every time you say black out your mouth, you're committing genocide against yourself and your people. That's how demonstrative and dark magical spell that word black is when it's put on people. That shit is over.
Now I'm gonna play it again for you so you can
We can never be slaves because Slovakian is not our bloodline. These people are descendants from Slovakians. So when you call yourself a Negro or a slave, you calling yourself one of these people. Because historically, factually, that's where they come from. They come from the Paleolithic people. They're descendants of that. We, on the other hand, are the Aboriginal and Indigenous people on the planet. That mental chain of slavery, break it off your brain right now. What you choose to identify yourself as is the start. Dump black, dump minority, dump Negro, dump person of color, dump Latino, dump Hispanic. Dump that shit. Dump the narrative that these people are white people. Burn it, throw it in the garbage, it's over with. These are pale-skinned, hybrid Europeans. Call them who they are. They have another nation. They're not our nation. You can be an American or you can be a U.S. citizen. They can never be Americans. That's the difference that we got as Moorish Americans. Make the claim.
Now, you heard what he said about the difference between citizens and Americans. Just look up the definition of American in Webster's 1828 definition and look up the definition of American. You can pull it up online. 1828 Webster's definition of American. It has to do with the copper-colored races that inhabited the Americas. So, once again, like I said, be careful about classifying them all being from Europe because they're not. But the biggest thing that he mentioned is about the word slave. Okay? Slave means a Slavic or Slovenian, Yugoslavia. So most of us, our phenotype is not even of a Slovenian or a Slavic person. So this is the trickery in getting you to classify yourselves as ex-slaves and Negroes and the whole nine. And don't think that Garvey didn't know this, because he did know. He absolutely knew. So I want to play the first part again so you can hear it, because it may have jumped in too quick. I want to make sure you hear the very first part of it so you can kind of understand the gist of how important it is and exactly what they've done to us. Sorry about that. This thing is jumping around on me. Let me try and get to it again. People apologize for that. Let me find it again here. 1 second. Now he was kind of playing some games on me here, folks. Let me play the first part for you again.
Yes. So when you call yourself a Negro or a slave, Slovakian is not our bloodline. These people are descendants from Slovakians. So when you call yourself a Negro or a slave, you calling yourself one of these people. Because historically, factually, that's where they come from. They come from the Paleolithic people. They're descendants of that. We, on the other hand, are the Aboriginal and Indigenous people on the planet. That mental chain of slavery, break it off your brain right now.
Gotta break that.
What you choose to identify yourself as is the start. Dump black, dump minority, dump Negro, dump person of color, dump Latino, dump Hispanic. Dump that shit. Dump the narrative that these people are white people. Burn it, throw it in the garbage, it's over with. These are pale-skinned, hybrid Europeans. Call them who they are. They have another nation. They're not our nation. You can be an American or you can be a U.S. citizen. They can never be Americans. That's the difference that we got as Moorish Americans. Make the claim on your name and your land and your resources and everything else. The kingdom of the kings of heaven will be given to you. You might be talking like spirituality, love, and light and all that. But as soon as you say that you a person of color, black man or black woman, or you call a hybrid European white, you just neutralized everything positive that you said out your mouth.
Now, once again, I'm not here to push the Moorish narrative. However, I'm here to make sure you understand how important nationality is, whatever nationality you decide to claim. And I'm also here to point out the trickery and the deception that was done to our people in the 1900s, from 1900 to 1933. Excuse me, 1900 to 1945, really, the Great Reset. So that's just an example. Once again, that's the Real Kush Day, Cushday, the Real Kush Day on Instagram. So the brother puts out a lot of good information. Make sure you check him out and just look up the information on nationality. Nobody's asking you to be a Moor, but just check out the information on that. And we're going to continue on Garvey. In the next segment, we'll go over a timeline of Marcus Garvey so you can kind of see how serious this thing is here with Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois as well. So part 12. All right, this is part 12 of Marcus Garvey, and this will be, the information is from the UNIA ACLgovernment.com. UNIA-ACLgovernment.com, and this is a timeline on Marcus Garvey. So born August 17th, it goes into his birth, St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica. And we're going to continue, skip over a few things. I just want to point out a few things in the article. You can pull this up and read it yourselves. Once again, it's the UNIA-ACLgovernment.com. Continue on, 1901, young Marcus Garvey's apprenticed with his uncle, Alfred Burroughs, who had an extensive library which Garvey made good use. That's 1901 when he's young. We're going to move on. It's given some historical dates of some things that occurred, like Panama declaring independence from Colombia. The Panama Canal being dug. Garvey and his mom. We're going to continue 1907. Jamaican economy basically goes into a crash because of a hurricane. 1908, his mother dies. That's something about the British. 1910, September. Here it is, 1910, September. Garvey moves to Costa Rica and stays with material aunt, works as a timekeeper at United Fruit Company, UFC, published daily newspaper, La Nacion. His fellow blacks that might press for better working conditions and higher pay. Garvey is arrested for agitation. That's 1910 in Costa Rica. And we have to understand something about when Garvey moved off through South America, the prominent language was Spanish. So Garvey may have been very fluent in Spanish. We probably never heard about that, but I'm pretty sure he spoke a little bit of Spanish. So in 1911, he was arrested and released, by the way, in 1911. But it says right here, 1910 he was arrested and posted bail. But avoiding the authorities, Garvey flees to Panama. Okay. And in Panama, he publicizes the plight of the black workers to Panama Canal. And it goes on in 1911, June 26th through the 29th, the first Universal Racist Congress is held at the University of London. In attendance is an Egyptian-born Sudanese named Deuce Muhammad Ali. Okay, and a lot of times people I've noticed in history, they've confused Deuce Muhammad Ali with Noble Drew Ali. They have confused those two people. I've seen that several times. So Deuce Muhammad Ali was not Muhammad Ali's teacher. Muhammad Ali was not Noble Drew Ali's teacher either. So that's another misconception. Deuce Muhammad was close to Marcus Garvey. As a matter of fact, they studied together, and that was the connection between those two. They studied together in London. So he goes on to talk about some more historical events. 1911, 1912, Garvey visits Ecuador. He visits Nicaragua, Honduras, Colombia, and Venezuela. So remember then again, the prominent language of those places was Spanish. It says, while still in Central America, Garvey learns from black veterans that Jamaican and Barbadian troops in the West Indies regiments had been used to crush and decimate indigenous Africans for Imperial England, such as the last Ashanti Wars, 1887-1900. So, once again, this is there's so much trauma going on in South America, but for some reason, Garvey's focus is on what's happening in Africa. So, 1912, it says January, Garvey returns back to Jamaica, right? And 1912, Deuce Muhammad Ali founded the African Times and Orient Review, ATOR, in London. Because there was a substantial amount of Africans in London, and there always have been. And once again, at certain times, melanated people ran London. And if you take a look at Europe and London, it's pretty much just North Africa when you look and see how close it is. So once again, the journal advocates Pan-African nationalism, and this is Deuce Muhammad Ali. It becomes a forum for African and other intellectuals and activists from around the world. And it says the journal covers issues in the United States, in the Caribbean, West Africa, South Africa, and Egypt. So we go on, 1912, right here. In autumn, Garvey moves to London, England. Okay? A lot of times, this part of Garvey's life is omitted from a lot of information. So autumn of 1912, 1914, Garvey attends and studies law, philosophy, speaks at Hyde's Park, Speaker's Corner, visits Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy, Spain, Austria, Hungary, and Germany. Now, for him to be from a penniless family, he's doing a lot of traveling. And even in his younger days, he was moving all around South America. You still needed to have money to do that in those times. And you see how many European nations he just visited. So I'm going to show you that Garvey was not from a poor family. His father was very well off, very, very well off. In 1913, Garvey works for and is mentored by Deuce Muhammad Ali. I had clever that, excuse me. Let me continue here. In 1914, June 28, it talks about an assassination of the Archduke, which was a world event. Goes on to talk about the cruises. July 15th, 1914, Garvey finally returns to Jamaica from London, from Birkbeck University, which was a prominent university, Birkbeck College. It's called the University of London, but they just call it Birkbeck College, and they don't use University of London because they're trying to make it look like it's just a regular school, but it's not. It's an elite school, always has been, still is today. So I gave you the reference to the video to watch, the YouTube video, where it discusses what Garvey may have or may not studied at Birkbeck. They didn't offer a philosophy course, and I think they were just starting to offer a law. So no one is really certain what he studied at Birkbeck. And the lady clarifies that in the video from one of the earlier parts of this series of Garvey. If you listen, you'll see it, and I give reference to the video. I don't have it in front of me. But I think it's titled, What Did Garvey Do at Birkbeck University? I think that's what it's titled. You can pull it up on YouTube. So let's continue. It goes on to 1915, 1916, just world events. So here it is, March 24, 1916. It says Garvey arrives in the United States on the ship SS Talek to start a tour. You can't start a tour with no money. To raise funds for a vocational school in Jamaica similar to Tuskegee Institution. So that's what he wanted to do, is to raise funds for a vocational school in Jamaica. He was trying to connect with Booker T. Washington. Some say he did, some say he didn't. Some say that Booker T. died before they could connect, because Booker T. was substantial in the founding of Tuskegee University. Now, this is interesting, okay? We got March 25th, 1916. And this date may be off by about 1 year, because by Garvey's own account, he didn't arrive into the country until 1917. that was covered in another part earlier in a court document, that he had only been here for 5 years, and I think that was in 1921. He's saying he'd only been here for 5 years, or 1922, one of the two. But so this date may be off a little bit. But after moving to New York, he found work as a printer by day and at night. And he would speak on street corners, much as he did in London's Hyde Park. On the 9th of May, 1916, he held his first public lecture in New York City at St. Mark's Church in the Bowery, and undertook a 38-state speaking tour. Now, his first speaking engagement didn't go very well, because at that time, Garvey couldn't speak English well. They don't tell you he couldn't speak English well. They just say he bumbled and he was embarrassed and nervous. Well, he couldn't speak English very well. He still had a heavy Jamaican accent, and he probably spoke Spanish. Would have been one of those other languages. So now it makes sense to why the first speech that he gave at this church, he was pretty much laughed off the stage. But you can pull that up too. But he undertook a 38-state speaking tour. Now, he's just in the country. He just got to the country, and he's went on, started a tour to raise funds for vocational school in Jamaica. And he's in the States, by the way. But you'll see earlier in other parts I covered that his organization failed in Jamaica. The Jamaicans didn't want to change their nationality from Jamaicans to Negroes. They knew the importance of what it was to be a Jamaican. So his organization initially failed in Jamaica. And this is one of the reasons why he came to the States. He had been everywhere else. So let's go. But once again, undertook a 38-state speaking tour. Ain't that something? 1916. He just got here. Or 1917. May 1916, it says he starts the 38-state speaking tour. Never says where he got his money, but in New York, he did meet A. Philip Randolph, and he also met W.E.B. Du Bois when he first got to the country. You can pull that up later as well. So obviously, let me go back to the church. St. Mark's Church, if you pull up the Reverend, which is a gentleman, a white gentleman, I believe the gentleman also had ties to Breitbach University. So it already appears that something is this is not a coincidence. If you pull up the Reverend's name of Mark's Church in 1916, when Garvey gave his first speech, because this gentleman allowed him to speak in front of massive crowds at his church. Now, nobody would just randomly do that unless they had prior information on you or something. You just don't pop up and start speaking at a large church in New York, especially a white man's church. So starts the 38 speaking tour, 1917 forms the first UNI division outside of Jamaica. The one in Jamaica had failed. So there's not one in Jamaica. Now, once again, people that want to say that Garvey was the forerunner to Noble Drew Ali, that's a bunch of bullshit. And it can't be true, and it can't be authentic, because Garvey's just in the country in 1917. Drew Ali was, Canaanite Temple was on the scene in 1911, and it was established in 1913 in Newark, New Jersey. They had several locations, and they were well known throughout the state of New York and D.C. by 1917. And so we're going to have to crush that information about Garvey being the forerunner to Drew Ali. It's simply just impossible according to the dates. Their only connection may have been the printing press. I think that's probably what they networked on, was the printing press. As far as them both getting their newspapers distributed, as well as A. Philip Randolph's newspaper. So Garvey had connections with the printing press. He knew how to do all that. So, 1917, East St. Louis riots. All right. In 1917, Garvey delivers his East St. Louis conspiracy speech in Lafayette Hall. Does it say the riots occurred before he got there? So, we'll continue on. Garvey worked to develop a program to improve conditions of ethnic Africans at home and abroad under the UNIA auspices. 1918, he began publishing the Negro World newspaper in New York, which was widely distributed. Really? So how was he getting his newspaper distributed so quickly? And he's just in the country a year and a half before. Garvey worked another without pay until November 1920. He uses the Negro World as a platform for his views to encourage growth of the UNIA. Let's continue on. It says 1919 UNIA membership is at least 2 million. I don't know if that's in the country or worldwide. Probably worldwide. But we know that Garvey exaggerated his membership. Now, there were people that were giving money to the UNIA that weren't members of the UNIA. They were just giving money. Black Star Line of Delaware is incorporated at 10 million in 1919. And he's just here 2 years before, 1916, 1917. Kind of balling real quick, isn't he? Purchase of the first SSS Yarmouth is rechristened SS Frederick Douglass. That's not true. It was called the Yarmouth. He said it was the Frederick Douglass, but the name was still the Yarmouth. I'll show it to you. They never changed the name of the ship. The Yarmouth is a word that goes back to England, and you can look up the Yarmouth Lodge, Masonic Lodge in England. SS Sadie is a second vessel. The SS Kanawha is the third vessel. That was his yacht. That's not a vessel. That was a personal and private yacht. I'll show you the pictures. All right. 1919, Edgar Hoover writes a letter to Special Agent concerning Garvey, indicating that Garvey has not violated any federal laws yet. You know why? Because the Bureau of Investigation was assisting the Garveyite movement. And I'll show you how. Well, I'll give you an example how. You see how quick the word is getting out? And those of you who understand Negro, Black, and Colored, in 1919, you had the Jim Crow laws coming. And land was very important. The quickest way to get land and asset from indigenous, autochthonous Americans was to get them to change their nationality to Negro, Black, and Colored. So, Hoover didn't really send in agents until later on to investigate Garvey, when he was basically scamming a lot of people, including government agents, out of money. Okay? And people associated closely with government agents. They started losing money. And that's initially when Hoover decided to go after Garvey. All right, so in 1919, George Tyler fires 4 shots into Garvey, was not injured. Tyler indicates that Edward Kilroy, assistant district attorney, sent him to kill Garvey. That could be true, or it could not be true, because there was a lot of people that were that were investors into Garvey's movement, politicians too. So what better way to get Negroes out of the country to get their land, you know? So 1919, the next day, George Tyler jumps to his death while completely handcuffed. That's false. He was killed in prison. He was thrown off a 3rd floor when he was in jail. He was thrown over a rail. And the rumor, there's different reports on what happened. Some say it was prisoners, some say it was guards. So, by the way, George Tyler had lost his life savings investing in the UNIA and in Garvey. He lost his life savings. He wasn't arrested the day he shot Garvey. He was arrested a couple days after. The police didn't even bother to go get him until a few days later, because they kind of knew what was going on about that. So here we go. Bureau of Investigation hires, see that, 1919, see this? See, after this happens, see this, after this happens, right? Bureau of Investigation hires their first 5 black agents so they can spy on Garvey and UNIA. James Worley as Agent 800, James Edward Amos, Arthur Lower Brent, Thomas Leon Jefferson, and Earl E. Titus. And one of these gentlemen was a close friend of the Captain Cochran, who was the captain of the Yarmouth ship. So they already had a connection to people in Garvey's movement. That's not a coincidence, because they were already there making sure everything went smooth initially. So one of Garvey's close confidants, Earl T. Titus, one of Garvey's close confidants, Herbert Bullen, Agent P-138 was a spy, James C., one of his close confidants. When did that happen? Because they were already there, close confident. Because they was already there. And I told people that. They didn't believe me. They weren't stopping Garvey from getting his word out. They were making sure it went smooth and got out quickly. Because you're getting people to change their status, which opens up their estates for other people to claim. All right? And it says right here, Herbert Bolin, Agent P-138, was a spy, close confidant, one of Garvey's close confidants. And James E. Amos was an ex-bodyguard of Theodore Roosevelt. How are you getting people like this to be around you, Mr. Garvey, and you only been in the country for 2 years? 1920, you and I had 1,100 chapters in 40 countries around the world. You see this shit in 1920. He's been in the country for all of 3.5 years, possibly. All right? Garvey plans to develop businesses. Let's continue. August, UNI membership is at least, look at this, 4 million. 4 million. Right? August 1st, the parade to start the first UNA attracts 150,000 Africans in Harlem. It's calling everybody Africans. All right. 25,000 members attend UNI at MSNBC, 10 abreast for 2,500 rows. Let's keep going. Now, remember, Garvey's word is all over now. Your black Negroes and colors. A few of you are going to be able to make this connection. There's already been one riot. St. Louis riot. That was a major riot. Was Garvey there before or after? We don't really know, because these dates are maybe a little bit off. But if he was there before, then okay. But if he was there afterwards, okay, well. June 1st, 1921, Tulsa white mob destroys Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Garvey had already did his 35-state speaking tour. This is part 13B, Introduction to Garvey. When you get a chance, look up the definition of just sanguineous and just soli. Just sanguineous, just soli. Make sure you look up those definitions as we continue on Garvey. So here we go. We covered the assassination attempt on Garvey by George Tyler. Fired 4 shots into Garvey, who's not injured. Amy Ashwood jumped in front of him. I think she got hit a couple times, but Tyler indicated Edward Kilgore, talked about that, sent him, which is could be true, could not. But George Tyler was thrown to his death in jail from the 3rd floor. We talked about the Bureau of Investigation sent 5 agents, and we see one was one of Garvey's close confidants. It means he'd already been there, and I told people that before, that those agents that the Bureau of Investigation initially was not even, they knew everything that was going on with the UNIA, and they were kind of assisting it. As a matter of fact, his close confidant is the one who introduced him to Cochrane, which would be the captain of the Yarmouth, one of his ships. So they were there, and everything was Garvey's movement was going full steam ahead with a lot of assistance from a lot of people, and the Bureau of Investigation was already there. And then we talked about the James Woolley's in here, one of the initial agents. But there was 5 that was sent in. There was one already there. So, and we talked about James E. Amos was an ex-bodyguard of Theodore Roosevelt. So how in the hell are you getting people like that around you, Mr. Marcus Garvey, to do your security? But we're going to see that Garvey was a billionaire by today's standards as well. So people don't know that. But we talked about the 1,100 chapters in 40 countries around the world in 1920. Supposedly, he had only been on the scene for a few years. We didn't talk about his plans to develop the business manufacture in every marketable commodity in every big U.S. industrial center, as well as Central America, the West Indies, and Africa. Related endeavors, including a grocery chain, restaurant, publishing house, and other businesses. Sound like he was doing pretty good. He had only been in the country people for 3 years. Okay, 3 years. 3.5. Pushing it. So national prohibition starts in the United States of America, and Garvey was actually moving rum, or supposed to deliver, I forget how many cases of rum, from New York to Cuba. There was an agreement he had to do that on one of his ships, and that didn't go through. You can pull that up as well. 25,000 members at UNA meetings. We talked about that. Let's skip down. 1921. Now remember, Garvey did a 35-state tour earlier, and he could not been in St. Louis before the riots, or he may have been there afterwards. But here we have June 1st. Tulsa white mob destroys Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there's different stories on how that occurred. But there is a great decimation of Black Wall Street. Was Garvey there before or after? Most likely he was there before, because he was in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. While in Atlanta, KKK Imperial leader Edward Young Clark requests a meeting with Garvey. Afterwards, other black leaders, U.S. General Attorney Harry M. Daugherty, to have Garvey incarcerated. Afterwards, Assistant District Attorney Leo he looks like Healy, testifies that Garvey is a member of the KKK. Possible that Garvey was not a member of the KKK, but they did have between 5,000 and 20,000 black members or associates or people that were helping them do things in different areas. The Klan had a lot of power, people. So that's not a stretch if you knew the amount of power they were gaining during the 20s. Jim Crow laws and other things. 1923, trial ends with Garvey being found guilty of mail fraud. We continue. Garvey begins incarceration at Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. In 1926, his membership is at least 6 million. That's exaggerated. 26, UNI opens Liberia University in Claremont, Virginia. Garvey's sentence is commuted by Calvin Coolidge, and I believe Garvey had assistance in law from a visit from that prophet that you never hear about, the man you never hear about. Noble Drew Ali visited Garvey in prison, possibly giving him advice, or it could have been one of those meetings where it's like I told you so. You probably should have just got with us, and we could have made this thing massive. So there were Garveyites that were going back and forth between the Moorish Science Temple at the time and the UNIA. So Garvey is deported to Jamaica via New Orleans, where a large crowd met him at Orton's Wharf in Kingston. Garvey travels to Geneva to present the petition of the Negro race. Now, Garvey had been all over South America. He had been all over all over England. You saw that earlier. Why didn't Marcus Garvey go to Liberia earlier on when he was traveling all through South America? And then he went back to Jamaica, and then he went over to London in Europe. How come he never went to Africa? How come he never set foot in Africa? I could understand after the fact when, maybe some of the leaders of the country considered him to be an agitator. They didn't want him there for other reasons. But why didn't he go earlier on in his life? He never went. 1928, Garvey travels to Geneva to present the petition of the Negro race. Negro race. Told you about what the word Negro means. Garvey founds the People, number 39's political party, the first modern political party in Jamaica, focused on workers' rights, education, and aid to the poor. I think he ran for office during this time too, and he lost in a landslide. The Jamaicans voted for the other person instead of Garvey. 29 through 31, Garvey founds the Black Man newspaper. 1930, Garvey is reelected to the council in Kingston. That was a small council. He lost an election in Kingston during one of these times. I have the article. But Garvey launches the Elder Weiss Amusement Company. Garvey got a lot of money, don't he? Garvey founds the New Jamaican newspaper. Founding a lot of newspapers, huh? Garvey leaves Jamaica and heads to London, 1935. 1935. Didn't go to Africa. Garvey writes his poem, Rosh Nas of Ogaden. 1937, Garvey sets up a school of African philosophy in Toronto to train UNIA leaders. Toronto, 1937. Still not in Africa, still never went to Africa. Let's see this right here. Garvey gives evidence before the West Indian Royal Commission on conditions in Ethiopia, but you've never been there yet. You've never been. 1940, Garvey reads his premature obituary while in London. 1940. 1940, Garvey dies in London. Some say he had strokes, and some say he was poisoned, and some people don't know what happened. 1940, June 20, James R. Stewart is named successor to Honest Marcus Garvey, whereupon the parent body is moved to Cleveland from New York. 1949, James R. Stewart moves to Liberia and established the parent body in Liberia. Now, he went with no problems. James R. Stewart went to Liberia, but how come Garvey didn't go? 1951, international headquarters established in Philadelphia. Why don't you establish them in Africa someplace? That's what you wanted to take everybody back to, but you never went. All right, so it just goes on to talk about some other historical things with Garvey, but very interesting timeline on Marcus Garvey. So now let's hit a few other things here as we continue on Garvey. Let's talk about this article. This Garvey was not born poor. Talks about his father, and this is Marcus Garvey, a reappraisal. So you can pull that up, and it states right here: Garvey was born far better off than the average Jamaican in 1887. He was the son of a fairly prosperous stonemason who always acted as if he did not belong among the villagers. Of course, the senior Marcus Garvey was a morose and solitary man, but he was not totally antisocial. He was a member of the Westland congregation, presided over by a white man. That's a church. He was among the 4 children of this white man, this white minister, and he had 5 children of another white man whose property adjoined that of the Garveys. So this it kind of cuts off because it wants to charge you to actually read the whole article, but that's the title of the article. It's Marcus Garvey, a reappraisal. Pull that up. See if you guys want to pay the $57 to get the real information on Garvey's father. And this is the Black Star Line ad. All right, for the Black Star Line. Colored men. Look at that. Shipmasters, engineers, wireless operators. All right, there it is, Black Star Line. Show you a few other pictures. And this is a picture of the Shady Side when it was broken down. That's the Shady Side after it had almost sank. It had to be rescued. It didn't make it out of the port. Something went wrong with it, and it almost sank. And a Navy ship had to pull up and rescue the passengers off of the Shady Side. This is the Shady Side when it was fully running and everything. Does this ship look like it can make it to Africa? Would you get on this ship to go to Africa? Okay, because it was not meant to go to Africa. It was just meant to travel along the coastlines. It's a ferry. Move people from coast to coast. From coastline to coastline. This is the Kinawa, I believe. The yacht. This is a yacht. Kanawah. Garvey's second unpaid for yacht. This was never paid for. Still owed on this. Okay. This is a yacht. This is not meant to go across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. It could probably make it to the Caribbean, but you're not taking nobody to Africa in this ship. That's his yacht. So it wasn't one of his 3 ships of the Star Line. He just used it to say it was, but it was actually a yacht. And there's an article I read earlier that shows you that it was his personal yacht. Garvey had a yacht, unpaid for. This is the Yarmouth, Garvey's ship, the only one that was purchased. This is the Yarmouth, and it was not renamed the SS Frederick Douglass or the Phyllis Wheatley. That's a lie. There was no ship called the Phyllis Wheatley. They were saying it was the Phyllis Wheatley. They were saying it was the Frederick Douglass. But there was nothing ever changed to state that this was either. It was called the Yarmouth, which is a name that comes out of England. They never tell you what Marcus Garvey's mother and father were from. Okay, here is the murder of Delroy Bundy. Talked about that. You can pull that up. That's Saturday, November 1922. Is the Dallas Express. And Delroy Bundy to manage business of Garvey concerns. And of course, he was killed also. He was killed later on by Garveyites. Disagreements. And here we go right here. We'll skip down to the bottom of this article to where it says Garvey's route was cut short in 1923 when he was sent to Atlanta Federal Prison for defrauding his followers of an estimated $1 million. Later, Garvey returned to Jamaica, and was jailed again and finally went to London. So he was thrown in jail in Jamaica. And there's some other rumors about Jamaicans weren't too happy with Garvey. So just a conclusion for you here on Marcus Garvey, deep dive into Garvey. Once again, if you want to contact and build, you can contact at solid, SOLID, mind, MIND, productions at gmail.com. And those of you who know about nationality and can kind of put some things together from what's been presented to you in this dive into Garvey. And no disrespect to anyone, it's just some things that need to be pointed out to people, especially when they say that Garvey was the forerunner to Durrani and their philosophies were totally different, except when it came to economics. And anyone that knows about nationality, Negro, black, and colored, and they know how important nationality is, there's no way that could be so, unless they were just networking off of making sure that they could both get their newspapers out. But you literally have thousands of articles that you can find, audio speeches on Marcus Garvey still today. And you can only find about 15 or 20 on Noble Durrani. Very, very interesting. So, the other thing I'd like to point out to you is a gentleman by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois. So let's see if we can pull up the W.E.B. Du Bois article and show you about Mr. Du Bois here, and how when Garvey first arrived to the country, he basically linked up with A. Philip Randolph and W.E.B. Du Bois. They knew of each other. A. Philip Randolph is the one who took Garvey around New York, and then W.E. Du Bois would meet up with Garvey later on. So this is called the Universal Free Masonry.org. And Masonic biographies, W.E.B. Du Bois, and it talks about a Freemason. As a Freemason, educator and activist, W. Du Bois was a champion of the rights of the oppressed and bringer of Masonic virtue of equality. So, one of the greatest strengths of Freemasonry, resulting in mysteries and its mysteries being perpetuated through the centuries, has been the ability to look beyond the arbitrary divisions imposed on human beings by the social currents of the time. At all times throughout history, Masonic lodges have existed in spaces of complete equality where men of seemingly opposing views had been united on the level. So, W.E.B. Du Bois. And when you look into Mr. Du Bois' background, very interesting. Mr. Du Bois paved the way for the Firestone Tire Company to get into Liberia and exploit workers to the level of slavery. Later on, he said he apologized for it, but I think he knew what was going to happen. Mr. Du Bois was a billionaire by today's standards also. Very wealthy. Very wealthy. Wrote a lot of books, philosophies, making you Negroes and blacks and coloreds and ex-slaves. So we have Du Bois, we have Marcus Garvey, we have A. Philip Randolph, We have another gentleman, Bruce Gritt, another person you don't hear about very much. You have Arthur Schomburg. All these people were painting you, and more, were painting you as Negro, blacks, and colors. Even Booker T. Washington, to a certain extent, was doing the same. We had a nationality before the 1900s. It was being chipped away from us, and we were being replaced with these labels of chattel, ex-slaves, stateless people, by a lot of men who had one thing in common. Therefore, I think so-called black people had 2 million acres of land in 7 states. It might have been 3 million. I forget what it was. 7 states in the South. And then by 1940, it was under 300,000 to 400,000 acres of land. During the time of Jim Crow laws, nationality was under attack, and we were all Negroes, black, and colors. And then you look at the 35-state tour, and you look at what ensued after. It was a bunch of riots, race riots. Kind of like the same thing with Black Lives Matter, right? The murder of George Floyd, other murders, and all of a sudden, cities are burning all over the place. Only in certain areas, though. Only in specific areas. So, kind of see some of the same sort of things. Who funded Black Lives Matter? Who funded Black Lives Matter? Some say George Soros. And you have the 3 women who were proclaimed Marxists. 3 lesbians. One of them's married to a transgender. And their belief system is Marxism. Communism to the extreme. People wonder why. If you never thought about it, think about why Marxism, socialism, and communism has always been a part of the philosophy of a lot of so-called black, Negro, and African American leadership. Communism, socialism, and Marxism are foreign philosophies to the Americas. It's foreign. Not to mention it's satanic also. It's foreign. And it's embedded in our communities even to this day. It's embedded. I'm not saying capitalism is better than everything, but we've never seen capitalism. According to how it's defined, we've never seen that. Just look it up. You ain't never seen that. So what we're under is not capitalism. It's just, they just calling it that. It definitely is not capitalism. But we always see the socialists and Marxism and communism in our communities. Garvey made a lot of socialist comments. Not necessarily communist, but something we need to look into, man. The biggest way to get you to be a person who doesn't have quarter, is not given quarter in any place in the world, is to get you to commit treason against your own nation. Yep. The boy, Garvey, Schomburg, Bruce Gritt, Philip A. Randolph. All your greats, man. We can go on and on and on, man. They all got one thing in common. And your land is gone. So I rest peace. I hope you learned something from this dive. If you have, let me know. Anything strikes you as interesting, let me know. I'm not asking for a bunch of likes. Don't care if you follow me or subscribe. It's just about getting information out. Once again, no disrespect to anybody. You're part of a society, that's your choice. You're part of a fraternity, that's your choice. Sororities, that's your choice. All of that, it's your choice. But we're not black, Negroes, or colors. We're not ex-slaves. The next move is to dive into slavery and show you how they've lied about that as well. Get ready for that one, because that one's going to blow your fucking mind. So I'll leave you words of love and light. Peace, and thank you for watching the dive into Marcus Garvey.